one of the things that kind of blew me away during my military career, no matter where I went, whether it was Key West or Fallon, Nevada, or San Diego, California, it didn't matter. There was always this feeling of being watched by a foreign intelligence, and it could have been China, it could have been Russia, it could have been you name it. In my book, I picked China, and I would challenge anybody who's listening to go to the New York Times website and in the search bar type in Chinese espionage. And almost every single day, the New York Times would publish an article talking about how the Ministry of State Security is involved in academia, some professor at some university doing something, involved in industry, where they're stealing secrets for you name it. I mean, it could be a weapon, it could be a technology for energy, in government. I
Yeah,
mean,
we had
you
that
name
Chinese
it.
spy sleeping with what was Congressman Eric
Yeah.
Swalwell? Is that yeah?
Yeah. I mean, and it's not just the United States, it's everywhere. When I was in Afghanistan, I ran into Chinese troops in Afghanistan. I was in Africa with JSOC and saw what China was doing, building a base in Djibouti right across from the American base. And it was big enough for, I think, like one Chinese aircraft carrier. They could land like several transport aircraft with several regiments of troops. I mean, it was some outrageously sized base, but they are everywhere around the continent. I mean, around the world, and they are challenging our dominance, around the world. And but they're doing it at home too. And I think, I would always think before I threw anything away in the trash in my hotel room, okay, who does the maid work for? So nothing even remotely classified or related to the military was going to go in the trash. Even if I was on a military base, I treat it that way, because they're so prevalent in their espionage gathering activities. So when I set out to write this book, I wanted it to be domestic. I wanted it to be something that anybody, regardless of their background, whether they're come from a military background or a civilian, that they could find it thrilling, right? They could see something happening in the book and go, man, that could actually happen in real life. And I really think that most of the stuff I write about could.
You speaking about the Chinese spying stuff reminds me of the recent event, of course, that I'd love to hear your take on the Chinese weather balloon
Yeah.
being flown over the Midwest. What was your take on that?
um, yeah, that's a really, really good question. There's people that obviously have way more knowledge about it than I do, and could make a better decision. I would not have allowed that to happen. Knowing what I know as a civilian, which is that it was just gathering intelligence, I would not have allowed that to happen. Now, my second book, Outlaw, I talk a lot about synthetic bioweapons, and to do the research for that, I talked to a professor that at Columbia who used to teach at West Point. He worked on the I think it was the Countering Terrorism Center, at West Point, and he wrote articles on synthetic bioweapons and the type of science that goes into creating these things. And one of the things that he said that really kind of terrorized me is that it's possible to create a weapon, where you can have an on and off switch. So you could spray an entire continent with something that we would never even know we were exposed to it until some environmental factor just flips a switch, and now that can cause a mutation in our body to do something, right? So think about the shingles. Shingles comes from chickenpox. So if you had chickenpox as a kid and then you've recovered from it, now that lives in your body dormant until some environmental factor in your 50s triggers it and you get shingles, which is why we have to get the shingles vaccine. So what he's saying is, like, if I wanted to make half the population sterile, we could easily do that, just infect everybody. And then at some point you flip a switch by exposing them to something that's completely innocuous. And now all of a sudden they're sterile and they can't have kids. So my fear when I hear that and then see this weather balloon, spy balloon, whatever, flying over the country is, what are they doing? Are they spraying something? is there an EMP on board where if they detonated that at that altitude, it would be totally devastating to our infrastructure? Is that why we didn't shoot it down before, until it got off the coast? I don't know. But as a writer, I'm thinking about these things and they terrify me. And I think the science supports that those are real fears. But now as a fighter pilot, I would have loved that opportunity to launch and shoot this thing down before it got anywhere near Montana. You know what I mean?
I mean, and that would be a thrill for you.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
when I heard about it, I think part of my reaction is like, what intel are they gathering that they don't have already? When you hear that TikTok is like the #1 app in America, and I think people just stupidly think, well, what's the big deal? It's people doing dances. It's a fun thing. It's viral,
Right.
and
Right.
the amount of data they're collecting, and also the amount of like anger that they incite in the American public with what they trend and what
Yeah.
information they get out there. I mean, I could talk about with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I've just seen that no matter where people side on this, there's just a ton of misinformation that young people are
Mhm.
getting. And I think that this is where they're getting it because they
Yeah.
all seem to be repeating the same talking points that just as a American who tries to keep up with these things, I know is incorrect.
Right.
It is factually incorrect that before Israel was established that there weren't Jewish people living there, right? And
Right.
it's
Right.
out there viral that it's just
Right.
basically like this was all Palestinians living there, and then
Yeah.
suddenly after World War II, these people took the land. It's a lot more nuanced of an issue than that, but it's very easy to create a viral video on TikTok. And I think they love the fact that they're creating a lot of hostility between Americans, and it's
Oh yeah.
largely due to social media that we're at each other's throats.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it's so easy to manipulate the average American these days. Most Americans don't take the time to read past a headline, and they purposely make headlines uh, to be insightful in one way, to get people passionate about something. And so I think so many Americans are just going to see this headline and immediately share it without even reading. And then even if you read it, maybe do a little more research, dig into it. Um, and we've lost that ability, I think, in this country to I want someone to challenge my views. I want someone to tell me you're wrong and here's the reason why. And then I will look it up for myself, and that's what I try to teach my kids. I try to teach them, don't just take what your teacher says face value. Look deeper into it, because there's always more to the story than what you're being given.
Yeah, I agree, and just the fact that they have the power though to silence, for example, if someone is putting up videos that are pro Taiwan, they'll make
Yeah.
sure that that does not trend on the platform. Yet we'll see that there's all this stuff trending of kids doing like violent acts in high schools, and that'll be
Hmm.
like the #1 thing trending on TikTok. Why is that being done? I think it is something more sinister than just this is what people are clicking on. They control those algorithms.
Yeah, no, they absolutely do. Yeah, like I said, it's easy to manipulate the American person. American citizen today is easily manipulated.